2 hours before a judge dismantled my husband's life. He leaned in so close, I could feel his breath on my cheek and smell the cologne he wore when he wanted to feel untouchable. "Today is the best day of my life," Kevin Bennett whispered, voice low and smug. "I'm taking everything from you." He said it like the verdict had already been signed. Behind him stood Sophie Lane, his assistant, his mistress, the woman he thought he'd trade me in for like a used car. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The little curl of her lips said enough. Pity, triumph, and the sharp joy of someone who believed she'd just won a prize. The courthouse hallway buzzed around us. Heels on tile, monotone announcements from distant courtrooms, the muted rustle of people carrying their private tragedies behind numbered doors. To them, we were just another divorcing couple. To me, this moment was the pivot my entire life had turned around. Kevin straightened his already perfect jacket and gave me the look he reserved for waiters who were too slow or interns who dared to correct him. "The condo is mine," he continued quietly, like he was listing items on a receipt. "The accounts are mine. You should have taken the settlement when you had the chance." I didn't reply. That bothered him more than any argument could have. He wanted tears. Panic. A desperate whispered, "Please don't do this." Anything that would confirm he still had control. Instead, I just folded my hands, centered my breathing, and met his eyes without flinching. "You always were quiet, Laura," he said, almost amused. "And quiet women lose in court. My lawyer's a shark. Yours looks like he got lost on the way to the retirement home." Behind him, Sophie shifted, crossing her arms in that casual, careless way of people who've never paid a mortgage in their life. The bracelet on her wrist caught the ugly fluorescent light. My bracelet. My money. The one purchase Kevin never imagined I'd trace back to him. He leaned in even closer, his voice dropping to a final, gleeful threat. "After today, you'll have nothing. No home. No leverage. No future." That's when my lawyer appeared at my side. Harold Whitman didn't look like a shark. No $1,000 haircut. No shiny cufflinks. Just a slim, older man in a well-worn suit, hair more silver than gray, a leather folder tucked under his arm like it had grown there. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't square up to Kevin. He simply turned to me and asked one question. "Mrs. Bennett, did you bring everything we discussed?" For the first time since Kevin cornered me in the hallway, I really looked at him. At the man who had blown up our life and walked into court expecting a parade. "Yes," I said evenly. "Exactly what you asked for." Whitman nodded once, satisfied. Then he shifted his attention to Kevin, his expression almost gentle. "In that case, Mr. Bennett," he said, "I suggest you brace yourself. Today is going to be enlightening." Kevin laughed, actually laughed, like this was all a great inconvenience he'd generously decided to endure. He had no idea that the lesson was about to be his. I was never the woman who commanded a room. I didn't have the kind of personality that arrived 5 minutes ahead of me. Most people only noticed me when something went wrong, when a bill got paid late, when a form was missing, when a deadline slipped. Quiet, organized people are like smoke alarms, invisible until you desperately need them. My whole life, I filled spaces not with noise, but with order. Numbers were my language. Spreadsheets felt like stories that just needed to be arranged correctly. While some kids doodled hearts in their notebooks, I was balancing imaginary budgets and making checklists. That's who Kevin married. When people asked what I did for a living, I'd open my mouth to explain that I handled the books for 3 small companies, all from the dining room table, coffee mug always within reach, cat sometimes asleep on the keyboard. But Kevin usually answered first. "She works from home," he'd say, waving a hand like that settled it. "She does some accounting. Nothing big. Nothing big." The way he said it shrank the hours I logged, the late nights double-checking reports, the tax deadlines I never missed. To Kevin, big meant things you could brag about at a networking event. No one boasts about a wife who keeps them out of IRS trouble. After we got married, I put my full-time career on hold so we could chase his. We moved when his company said jump. I rebuilt my tiny client list from scratch twice. If he needed to travel, I handled everything at home. Bills, doctors, broken appliances, you name it, so he could stay laser-focused on the next promotion. I called it teamwork. He called it support. In reality, the work wasn't shared. It just got quietly absorbed. At dinner parties, after his third glass of wine, Kevin liked to make little jokes that weren't really jokes. "I'm the provider," he'd say, clinking his glass with someone else's. "Laura keeps the house running. She's like our operations manager." People laughed. I smiled. No one ever asked who actually tracked where the money went. Who scheduled the mortgage payments? Who sat up at 1 a.m. quietly fixing his small mistakes before a bank or a boss noticed? He mistook my silence for softness. He mistook my patience for weakness. Quiet people see more than anyone realizes, because while everyone else is talking, we're watching. I noticed when he started coming home later. I noticed when drinks with clients turned into unexplained hotel charges because the booking system glitched. I noticed when our grocery bill and utility costs stayed the same, but our credit card payments somehow kept growing. I noticed when his affection didn't vanish. It just got distracted. His eyes were there, but some part of him had already left the room. I didn't accuse him. Not then. You learn a lot from numbers. But you learn even more from letting people think you're not keeping track. The day everything actually changed wasn't some dramatic explosion. No screaming in the kitchen. No suitcases by the door. It was a rainy Tuesday. The kind of steady, gray drizzle that makes the whole world feel like a waiting room. Kevin had left one of his expensive suit jackets crumpled over the back of the bedroom chair. He was always forgetting something. Wallets, key cards, half-read books. I used to find it endearing, like he was too busy being brilliant to be practical. I picked up the jacket, smoothing the shoulders. Out of habit, I checked the pockets. He had a talent for jamming important things everywhere. Receipts, hotel key cards, even flash drives, then insisting someone else had lost them. More than once, I'd fished something crucial out before it ended up in the washing machine. My fingers brushed against thick paper in the inside pocket. I expected a business card. Instead, I pulled out a folded, heavy stock receipt. I sat down on the edge of the bed before I even opened it. Something in the weight of that paper told me this was going to hurt. The logo at the top belonged to an upscale jewelry boutique downtown. The kind of place that doesn't put prices on the front of the display tags because if you have to ask, you shouldn't be there. Total, $5,000. Item, custom gold bracelet, blue stone. The date was yesterday. The time, 2:32 p.m. At 2:32 p.m. yesterday, Kevin had texted me, back-to-back meetings. He'd put a little heart emoji at the end, like a sticker over a crack. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I didn't burst into tears. What I felt was simpler. Colder. I set the receipt down on the nightstand, picked up my phone, and opened social media. Kevin had mentioned his new assistant once in passing. She's great, young, efficient, always smiling. You'd like her. Her name was Sophie Lane. How many Sophie Lanes could there be in our city? Apparently, only one who posted constantly. It took me less than 2 minutes to find her profile. The most recent photo had been posted the night before. A close-up of a manicured hand holding a glass of champagne in the backseat of what was clearly a very nice car. On her wrist, a gold bracelet with a blue stone, catching the light. The caption, "Best night of my life." Sparkles. I stared at the screen, then at the receipt. Bracelet. Boutique. Time. Amount. Caption. I didn't need a confrontation. I had confirmation. Sitting in our bedroom, surrounded by the life I thought I understood, something inside me clicked into place. Not shattered. Not broke. Just settled. The marriage was over. But the accounting? That was just beginning. I didn't wake Kevin up that night. He came home late, the smell of whiskey and cologne arriving 10 seconds before he did. He kissed me on the forehead, mumbled something about a long day, and fell into bed. I lay beside him, watching the rain trace lines down the window. I did not cry. Instead, I slipped out of bed, padded to the dining room table, opened my laptop, and created a new folder. I named it something no one else would ever notice if they saw it. Reconciliation. Emotions are loud. They cloud everything. They make you want to yell, to throw things, to send long, spiraling texts you'll regret in the morning. Numbers are quiet. Numbers don't care if you're hurt. They don't care if someone made promises with a ring on your finger. Numbers just sit there and tell the same story over and over until you finally listen. I started with what I could access easily: our shared credit card and bank accounts. I downloaded statements going back 3 years. Every transaction. Every line. Every date. Flights that didn't match work trips. Hotel charges in our own city. Restaurants I'd never heard of. Charges at boutiques I'd never set foot in. At first, it was small: extra dinners, late-night ride shares, work drinks that cost more than our weekly groceries. Then the amounts grew. Weekend stays, trips out of town for a conference, jewelry. I built a spreadsheet with multiple tabs: income, household expenses, transfers, miscellaneous. It didn't stay miscellaneous for long. Patterns emerged almost immediately. Certain restaurants repeated every other Thursday. Hotel bookings lined up with nights he'd had to stay near the client's office. And always, the same window of time on weekday afternoons when he liked to complain about being trapped in meetings. Next, I opened my own accounts. Month after month, there were transfers from me to him: mortgage, utilities, extra for this month, paying off card. In the memo line, I'd always written exactly what it was for. Neat. Clear. Innocent. Rent. Mortgage. Insurance. Groceries. All the invisible scaffolding that held our life up. I had never thought of those little notes as anything more than reminders. Now they were timestamps. Breadcrumbs. Receipts of who had actually been keeping us afloat. I added another tab: Sophie. Every charge I could reasonably tie to her: restaurants she'd checked into on social media, cities she'd posted from, that bracelet went there. All paid for with money I had either earned, saved, or freed up by making our life run like clockwork. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was bankrolling an entire second relationship with the future we were supposed to share. When I finished the first pass, I sat back and looked at the screen. It was all there. Not as a melodramatic story. Not as a screaming match. As math. And math was something I knew how to win. The next weeks felt like living 2 separate lives inside one apartment. In the daylight, I played my familiar role. I cooked dinner. I asked about his day. I listened to stories about how stressful work was and how important his next promotion would be. When he mentioned staying late at the office, I nodded, because that's what I had always done. He never noticed the difference. Abusers of any kind rarely do. They assume the person they've been stepping on will always stay exactly where they left them. At night, or any time he was out, I became someone else. I turned the tiny windowless storage room off the kitchen, the one that used to hold holiday decorations and a broken vacuum, into a private war room. I dragged in an old folding table, taped a cheap lamp to the wall, and spread out everything: printed statements, receipts I'd rescued from his pockets and glove compartment, my growing spreadsheets. I was methodical. I traced the condo first. Years earlier, when my grandmother died, she'd left me a sizable inheritance. Enough to change someone's life if they were careful. Kevin had been so proud when he suggested we use it for the down payment on our condo. "It'll be in my name," he'd said, "just for now. Easier with the bank since I've got the salary history. We're married. What's mine is yours. What's mine is yours." I downloaded the wire transfer records from the inheritance account. I followed the money. From my inheritance to Kevin's personal account to the condo developer. The numbers matched exactly. Not a single dollar of that initial payment had come from him. Then I looked at the mortgage. Every month, like clockwork, you could see it. My account: transfer to Kevin, mortgage. His account: mortgage payment to the bank. He'd insisted on handling it, so he felt like the man of the house. In reality, he was pressing a button with money I'd already placed there. Next came everything else. Flights with 2 seats booked but only one person ever mentioned. Upscale hotels in the city where we lived. Charges at a spa I'd never visited. Multiple purchases from the same jewelry store as the bracelet, spread over a year. I started graphing things, because accountants are wired that way. Lines rising with his bonuses, dipping when he'd burned through them. That's when I saw the transfers I'd somehow missed before. Not to Sophie. To online betting sites. $1,000 chunks disappearing at 1:14 a.m., 3:07 a.m., always after big bonuses hit his account, always when he was blowing off steam with the guys. He wasn't just selfish. He was reckless. He hadn't just risked my heart. He'd gambled with our stability. By the end of the month, I was no longer working from a place of heartbreak. I was operating from a place I understood much better. Documentation. Proof. Leverage. Finding a lawyer took longer than I expected. I wasn't looking for someone to hold my hand and tell me, "You deserve better." I already knew that. I needed someone who could take what I had gathered and turn it into something a judge couldn't ignore. A colleague from my old firm, one of the companies I still did books for, gave me a name, Harold Whitman. "He's not flashy," she said. "But if he takes your case, it means he sees the path." Just a wooden door with his name etched in a slightly faded gold plaque. Inside, the air smelled like old paper and coffee. Shelves lined every wall, sagging slightly under the weight of law books and files. There were no inspirational quotes, no modern art, just a framed law degree and a small plant doing its best in a dusty corner. I sat across from him and placed a thick, organized folder on his desk. I didn't start with, "He cheated on me." I started with dates and numbers. "This is my inheritance," I said, sliding over the first set of pages. "This is where it went. This is the condo. These are the mortgage payments. These are the transfers from me to him. These are the shared accounts. These are the charges that correspond with his affair. These," I said, putting down another stack, "are the gambling transactions. These," I added last, "are discrepancies between his actual deposits from work and what he reported on our joint returns." He listened without interrupting. He flipped through each section slowly, making small notes with a fountain pen, occasionally pausing to cross-reference something. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. He finally set the last page down and looked up at me over his glasses. "You didn't come here for sympathy," he said. "No," I agreed. "I came here because I want what's mine. No more, no less." He nodded, almost pleased. "You have enough documentation," he said carefully, "to argue that the condo is your separate property. You have clear records of marital funds being used for a long-term affair and for gambling, both of which courts tend to take very seriously when we phrase it properly. You also have evidence that his portrayal of himself as the sole provider is inaccurate at best." He steepled his fingers. "But this only works if we're patient. If we're precise. What do we do?" I asked. "We let him talk," Whitman said. "Men like your husband are often most dangerous when they're cornered, but they're also most honest when they think they're winning. We'll file. We'll present minimally at first. We'll let his lawyer posture. And then," his gaze sharpened, "when the time is right, we'll put your records in front of a judge and let the numbers speak." For the first time since that rainy Tuesday on the bed with the receipt in my hand, I felt something that wasn't numbness or anger. I felt control. The future still scared me. But now it looked like a spreadsheet waiting to be balanced, not a dark room I'd been pushed into. The morning of the hearing, Kevin walked into the courthouse like he was arriving at an award ceremony. Custom suit. Perfect hair. That same cologne. On his arm was Sophie, dressed just a little too boldly for a courtroom, and just right for a woman who wanted everyone to know she'd upgraded her life. She clung to him with the easy confidence of someone who had never once wondered how the bills would get paid. They looked, from a distance, like a couple about to close a very profitable deal. Whitman and I were already seated when they entered. Kevin's eyes flicked over me like I was background furniture. I watched his jaw tighten slightly when he saw my lawyer, as if suddenly realizing Whitman didn't look nearly as dismissible up close. His attorney was everything Whitman wasn't, loud tie, watch that probably cost more than my car, rolling briefcase. We were called in. Sophie stayed in the hallway, perched on a bench, scrolling on her phone. I could almost see her in my head mentally rearranging my furniture in her condo. Inside the courtroom, the judge took her seat and adjusted her glasses. She had one of those faces that had probably seen every kind of disaster you could drag into a courtroom. Kevin's lawyer went first. He stood, straightened his jacket dramatically, and launched into his opening statement. According to him, Kevin was the generous provider, the man who had worked tirelessly to give his wife a life of comfort. I was the dependent spouse, the woman who opted not to pursue a full-time career, who relied on Kevin's income while contributing around the house. He painted a picture of me as someone lucky to have been kept. I kept my hands folded in my lap and my expression blank. Let him talk, Whitman had said. Kevin listened to his lawyer with a small, satisfied smile, nodding at each flattering line like it was the chorus of his favorite song. When his attorney finished, the judge made a few notes and turned to our table. "Mr. Whitman," she said, "your opening?" Whitman rose slowly. He didn't start with a speech. He opened the folder I had given him. Neatly labeled, color-coded tabs. "Your Honor," he said, voice even and quiet, "this case is not about who speaks the loudest. It is about documentation." He held up the first exhibit. "We'll begin with the property in question, the condominium." He handed copies to the judge and opposing counsel. "These records show a deposit from Mrs. Bennett's inheritance account." He tapped the highlighted line. "Directly into Mr. Bennett's account, followed immediately by a transfer to the developer. There is no record of Mr. Bennett contributing any funds toward the down payment." Kevin shifted in his chair. Whitman continued, unbothered. "Furthermore, Your Honor, here are monthly statements clearly illustrating that the mortgage amounts originated from Mrs. Bennett's account, labeled mortgage, then transferred to Mr. Bennett's account for payment." He pressed the button. "She provided the funds." Kevin's lawyer tried to interrupt. "Objection, Your Honor. This is cherry-picking. The documentation is complete," Whitman replied calmly. "Counsel is free to present any evidence to the contrary if it exists." The judge glanced at Kevin's attorney. "Overruled for now. Continue, Mr. Whitman." Whitman nodded mildly. He moved on to the next stack. "Now we address spending during the marriage. Here we have a detailed breakdown of charges made on joint accounts for hotels, restaurants, travel, and jewelry, none of which Mrs. Bennett benefited from." He placed another set of pages on the stand. "For instance, this $5,000 bracelet from an upscale jewelry store." He paused. "Purchased during a weekday afternoon when Mr. Bennett claimed to be in meetings." He lifted up a printed screenshot. "This is a public social media post from Mr. Bennett's assistant, Mississippi Sophie Lane, wearing that exact bracelet with the caption, 'Best night of my life,' the same evening." Kevin's face drained of color. Across the aisle, his lawyer began rifling through his papers more anxiously. Whitman wasn't finished. "Let's move to gambling," he said quietly, as if discussing the weather. "Attached are records of large transfers from Mr. Bennett's accounts to online betting platforms, consistently following bonuses or unusually high commissions." He tapped another highlighted section. "These funds did not go toward household expenses or shared investments. They simply vanished. Thousands of dollars at a time." The courtroom, which had been humming with the low murmur of people shifting and whispering, fell nearly silent. Finally, Whitman placed one last bundle of pages before the judge. "And lastly, to complete the picture, Mrs. Bennett, with her background in accounting, has compared Mr. Bennett's claimed income to actual deposits and third-party payments. You'll see here discrepancies suggesting that some funds were rerouted through outside accounts and never reported properly." Kevin's lawyer sputtered. "Your Honor, this is beyond the scope of." "We are not pursuing criminal charges today," Whitman said smoothly, never raising his voice. "But it is relevant when Mr. Bennett portrays himself as the sole, upstanding provider while his wife contributed very little. The records show otherwise." Kevin looked at me across the table. It was the first time he'd really looked at me in months. Not past me. Not through me. At me. There was accusation in his eyes. And beneath it, something I hadn't seen from him in a long time. Fear. He had always assumed my silence meant ignorance. He was only now understanding that it had meant observation. The judge took off her glasses and sat back, flipping through the stack of documents with slow, thorough attention. The longer she read, the more the air in that room thickened. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. "This court will take a brief recess," she said. "When we return, I will issue my ruling." The gavel sounded. Everyone rose. As we filed out, Kevin leaned toward me, voice barely above a whisper. "What did you do?" he hissed. I picked up my folder, made sure the tabs were still in order, and met his gaze steadily. "I did what I always do, Kevin," I said. "I balanced the books." "Oh." The break felt longer than it probably was. I stood by a window in the hallway, watching people rush past, listening to the muffled echo of other lives being rearranged behind closed doors. Kevin paced a few yards away, his attorney in his ear, gesturing wildly at some document, as if he could argue his way out of math. Sophie sat back down on the bench, her earlier swagger dimmed. "What's going on?" she demanded in a low voice. "I thought you said this was straightforward." He didn't answer her. When we were called back in, the judge didn't waste time. She adjusted her notes, looked at both tables, and began. "In reviewing the evidence presented," she said crisply, "it is clear that the narrative provided at the outset of this hearing does not align with the financial records." She turned first to Kevin. "Mr. Bennett, you have portrayed yourself as the primary and responsible provider in this marriage. The documentation shows that is, at best, misleading." He swallowed. "The condominium," she continued, "is traceable directly to Mrs. Bennett's separate inheritance. The ongoing payments for that property also originated from her account. The court therefore recognizes the condo as Mrs. Bennett's separate property. It will not be considered a marital asset subject to division." Kevin's shoulders sagged. Whitman remained completely still beside me. "Furthermore," the judge went on, "the evidence of gambling and the use of joint funds to support an extramarital relationship constitutes dissipation of marital assets and financial misconduct." She shuffled a few more pages. "As such, you, Mr. Bennett, are ordered to reimburse Mrs. Bennett for half of the proven losses connected to those activities." Kevin's lawyer lowered his gaze to the table. "The vehicle purchased during the marriage," she added, "will remain with Mr. Bennett, along with all associated loan obligations." Each sentence seemed to scrape another piece off the future Kevin had so confidently described in that hallway. When the judge finished outlining the remaining minor divisions and formalities, she looked back up with finality. "This court finds that, based on the records, Mrs. Bennett has sustained the financial foundation of this marriage in ways that were neither recognized nor respected. The judgment reflects that reality." Gavel. Done. It took me a second to breathe. Not because I was surprised we had gone over the possibilities with Whitman, but because it was finally, officially over. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just exhaled. Outside the courtroom, Sophie was waiting like someone anxious for test results. "Well," she asked, stepping toward Kevin, "did we get the condo?" "The accounts." He didn't answer immediately. "No," he finally muttered. "What do you mean, no?" Her voice sharpened. "You told me you had money. You told me we'd be set. You said she didn't do anything." He stared at the floor. "The judge gave her everything, didn't she?" Sophie demanded. "After all that." "She had proof," he snapped, louder than he meant to. Heads turned. Somewhere down the hall a phone rang. He glanced at the screen. I didn't need to see the caller ID to know who it was. His company's name had been on enough of those deposit lines to be familiar. He answered. As he listened, his face went from pale to gray. They were concerned about discrepancies. They were initiating an internal review. They were placing him on administrative leave pending an investigation. The packet of anonymized documentation I'd mailed their compliance department weeks earlier, just facts, no accusations, had apparently found its target. By the time he walked out of that courthouse, Kevin no longer had a home, a guaranteed income, or the future he'd been so eager to flaunt in my face. I passed him on the steps as he stood there, stunned, phone still in his hand, Sophie already halfway down the sidewalk, walking fast, not looking back. He opened his mouth like he might say something. I didn't slow down. Some endings don't need words. Outside, the sky was still overcast, the air cool and damp, but it felt different now. Lighter. Like for the first time in years, there wasn't a weight on my chest. Whitman joined me at the bottom of the stairs. You did well in there, he said simply. Most people let their feelings trample their case. You let the evidence work for you. I gave him a small, tired smile. Numbers are patient, I said. They're willing to wait as long as they need to. He shook my hand, wished me luck, and headed off down the sidewalk. I walked alone to my car. Not lonely, just alone. There's a difference. The condo that waited for me wasn't just a place with walls and windows anymore. It wasn't the set piece of a life I'd been maintaining for someone else. It was mine. Bought with my grandmother's love. Paid for with my discipline. Kept with my stubbornness. The quiet that had once felt heavy inside those rooms now sounded like something else entirely. Peace. Kevin had wanted freedom without responsibility. He got it. I had wanted fairness. I earned it. People think revenge is about dramatic gestures, screaming matches in parking lots, shattered plates, scorched earth ultimatums. But this was what lasting revenge looked like. Paying attention. Being patient. Documenting everything. And then, at exactly the right moment, calmly placing the truth where it could no longer be ignored. If this story hit a nerve for you, don't just scroll away. Someone out there might be sitting at their own dining room table right now, feeling crazy, feeling small, feeling like their quiet strength doesn't count for anything. Share this with them. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I see every single one. And if you want more real-life stories about people who stopped being background characters in their own lives and took their power back, hit follow and subscribe to The Art of Revenge. Because sometimes the strongest move isn't shouting louder. It's staying calm, doing the work in silence, and waiting until the final balance comes due.